Welcome to the Product Design for Learning podcast. We've got a big name on this week. We have David James from 360 Learning, also of the Learning and Development podcast, which is great. You should all go and listen to it. David, thank you for coming on today. We've got your theme. It's not about process. We're talking about leadership in learning. So it's quite broad in title alone. For some, it's straight out management. For others, it might be around thought leadership, which I know you play a lot of time in. And it can also be perceived as things like leadership training, which is a whole other episode. But can you give us roughly 60 seconds on what you mean when you say leadership in learning?
Sure. Thanks, Greg. It's a pleasure to be on the show. So for me, leadership is taking your organisation and your L&D function from where it is in terms of the expected and requested version of L&D and extending everybody's expectation of what we can achieve. And I think that that's absolutely essential for us as professionals so that we don't live a lie of pretending that what's expected and requested will lead to impact. It's what I believe our organisations implicitly mean when they engage us, and also for employees as well, who I believe join the organisation for a deal that extends beyond I work, you pay, to one where they believe that they will be predictably and reliably developed in a way that manifests in growing their skills and improving their prospects. And again, the expected and requested version of L&D does not achieve that. So leadership requires the ability to recognize where you are, know deep within you what needs to be done, and then operate with savvy in order to get you, your team, your stakeholders, and therefore your organization along that journey to where everybody benefits.
I love the vision, and I really wholeheartedly agree with it. When you started saying you, your team, your stakeholders, and then it was the organisation, that is so many people to all get to follow, like a single vision and to crack on with it. Especially when we're talking about learning as one facet of how that company runs. What are the things that you've seen? Because you speak to a lot of people, obviously in 360. What have you seen from people where they find like they have a vision, they want to crack on, but there's something in the way? Like, what are the common things that seem to get in people's way with this?
The common things is that there is I'll lay this on the line. I am not a conspiracy theorist, but there is a thing called a conspiracy of convenience where everybody believes so much in the status quo and has so much invested in it that there is this cult-like belief that if we carry on doing the things we're doing that have never worked before, they'll work this time round. So for stakeholders, we talk about senior leadership and managers in general. The buying and selling of training is an easy one to grasp. I want training. I go to Greg. I tell him what I want. He delivers it. And in the meantime, so that's the buying transaction. I sell that to my team. You're going to go on a training course. So I sell that to them. They know how to buy that. I'm going on a training course, a day away from work, some new ideas, could have a bit of a jolly. Everybody buys in, everybody gets that. And L&D can conspire as well with, you've asked for training, I know how to buy that. I can sell that to you, and everybody's happy. But I don't think that deep down, experienced learning and development professionals really believe that model actually delivers outcomes. So within that conspiracy of convenience in which the buying and selling of a known path is a difficult one to crack. I mean, Greg, the bit that is implied at the heart of this is that L&D have to do something harder than they're asked to do, which many won't. I mean, why would you? Why would you make your life harder by saying to stakeholders, what you're asking for won't work? And for them to go, well, I've already sold that to my team. What do you mean it doesn't work? What do you want to do instead? You could be uncovering a can of worms, and then you could be putting your neck on the block to recommends something else that also doesn't work. So you're asking people to withhold their current belief in a system that is prevalent across geographies and levels and industries to actually do something and hold yourself to account to something that works. So
but surely that's our job. Surely that's what we should all be here to do, is to so if somebody comes along and said, I would like, and then you insert whatever thing it is they're asking for, whether it's good, bad, or something they've had a million times before, that's the beginning of a transaction. So I guess you then have a bit of a fork in the road where you can say, fine, we'll just do the transaction regardless what your thoughts are, whether you disagree, agree, or don't really care. Or you can then say, I'm going to challenge that, which is where I feel like that's the point of modern L&D. As in, like, more of an 80s, 90s approach is just, let's just get it done. Like, because that's what we do. Whereas now it feels like there is so much chatter about, we're here to have, we need a seat at the table. There's a whole thing that grinds my gears for different reasons. But that whole thing of, like, if we want to be seen as thought leaders and adding value and all the rest of it, because learning is a cost center, largely, you need to have a purpose. If you're just saying yes to everything, how quickly can yes to everything just be taken away by a machine that will just go, can you make me a thing? And it goes, yeah, here's your thing. You don't need those people anymore, because they're just saying yes all the time. But why do people, again, from your experiences, why do people struggle with that?
Well, I think part of the problem, Greg, is the paradox that learning and development is a popular function, but it's not a credible function. So we need to earn the credibility. We need to earn the tokens inside our organisation. And it's always as if every time there's a new leader in an L&D team, they have to go again. They have to earn that again. I can't tell you how many times I've seen it, Greg, that a highly credible, driven and impact focused L&D leader drives real change through their organisation, and instead of becoming the order takers, truly becomes the strategic partner. Now, for that to work, you need a different type of engagement with leaders and the workforce, one that pushes leaders for analysis and requires a level of consulting from the L&D team and persistence and hustle. And the workforce have to become partners in that, not attendees. Now, people like going on training courses because they're largely passive learning experiences. If you go, I can pretty much guarantee, Greg, if you go on a day's worth of training, the intention isn't for you to remember all of that stuff, because that is actually impossible. So the idea there is that in a day, enough ideas will be thrown, and then I've seen this so many times. The facilitator says, if you take one thing away from this, this will be worth it.
Just tell me that one thing then. Like,
just tell me that one thing. But I couldn't tell you the one thing because I didn't do the analysis at the outset. I don't understand your job. I don't understand your challenges or your stakeholders. So I've slung ideas at you, and I've told you in order to validate the approach and perhaps to make sure that I'm invited back, that one thing is going to be worth it. It's not. It's an abundant misuse of company resources. There are 12 people in there waiting for one thing, and they've all taken a day, and the job's racking up in the background. Right? It doesn't work. Right? That model is broken. So going back. Right? It's popular, but it's not credible. And going back to my point, which is, so I've seen the L&D leaders build these functions with great credibility, do something that is not asked for, but it's harder. The workforce, instead of attending the training courses, they are partners in a change that is outlined to them at the outset, which is data and evidence backed, but it's harder for them. But when that leader leaves, I cannot tell you how many times I've seen it, Greg, that it's almost as if the organisation breathes this collective sigh of relief. They bring in the status quo, who knock down the infrastructure of the progressive L&D leader that stood for impact, and they put in bog standard L&D, and the company love it. But the only problem with that, Greg, and I think that this is the spectre that hangs over learning and development, is there's this skills crisis that's going on right now on our watch, and the majority of L&D don't know how to address it. Now, you tell me, how the one team in an organization that is there to close skills gaps, perhaps on a more micro level rather than the macro that we've done, do not know how to close skills gaps. I can tell you exactly why. It's because the buying and selling of training in the way that it's been done over the last 25, 30, 40 years doesn't work.
Absolutely.
And that's it. I mean,
Absolutely.
So when you come down to it, like, L&D doesn't work the way that it's expected and requested. So what we need to do is we need to up our game, earn our credibility in order to push our stakeholders and partner with our workforce for outcomes rather than popularity.
Absolutely. And by the time this episode comes out, because I'm recording this early November now, so by the time this comes out, I would have already done my Learning Network talk later in November. So I can tell you what it's going to be, because no one will see this until afterwards. But basically, I did one before where I basically showed them 3 or 4 kind of major products and services I use every day. So it's things like Monzo, Spotify, the obvious kind of things. And then I asked people to think about, what do you use every day? Could be a learning thing, couldn't be a learning thing, it doesn't matter what it is. And then what I want to do is show people all of the processes and methods and design thinking that we all throw around in learning, and just be like, none of these will make any of these products and services. These products and services aren't made on how much people like it. And that's a thing. That's one of the metrics they probably use. But it's mainly, are we making money? Is this product penetrating markets that we weren't in before? Are we a market leader, or are we close to being a market leader? Have we got customer retention? Do people to a degree like using it so that they keep using it and then maybe recommend it? And then maybe if it's a bank and they've got their current account, maybe they add their joint account or their mortgage or their credit card or whatever it is to build out that service. If you take that approach of product design from a commercial world and put it into a learning perspective, it would change the game. As in, we cost companies money by turning up. We're not there selling their product. We're making things to help people be better, to ultimately do something, a big cog in a machine, or sorry, small cog in a big machine, to sell their product. If we're costing them money and then they go, but what have you done? Things still aren't moving, or this team can't do what they're meant to be doing, or they're getting what they need, but they're paying for it elsewhere, but we're still paying for you at the same time. Again, at what point do you just go, you're irrelevant as a function? Like, you just need to go away, because we either go outside to a specific partner, or we just don't need you. We can get another yes man that just happens to be called something GPT. And it's just, yes, GPT just does it for us then. Yeah, I'm going to get on my high horse about it for far too long, but I feel like that's the point where we're missing the point of how to focus on the problems that are happening. And it isn't just, we have, people that aren't good at this skill, so let's just give them training on that skill. What sits around that? Why is that skill important? Who has defined that skill is important, and what's happening around them? If we don't do any of that, we're just throwing, like you said, lots of things at a wall, waiting for someone to take one thing away. And then how long before another one thing comes along and they replace that one thing, and then they replace that? It just becomes madness after a while.
Yeah, well, I've seen, Greg, conversations I've had quite recently with L&D leaders who started in sales enablement, and what they were doing actually led to outcomes. So they were given L&D, right? So that for me is a peek behind the curtain of what's coming, because we have to solve this. We have to address this skills crisis. I mean, it's number one, it is hugely expensive to just hire in all the time. But I was on a panel very recently at an IT conference, and there was a CTO there. We were talking about skills-based learning, and this CTO said the skills are evolving so quickly that we cannot hire to plug the skills gaps. Like our only choice is to grow them. Now, so in a situation like that, who's he going to go to? Is he going to go to his L&D department, or are they going to create a shadow function like sales enablement, do something that works, and then go, why are we spending millions on this L&D team when they couldn't do this? So wait a minute, if they can't close skills gaps, why are we giving them millions?
Yeah. And I spoke to some other people earlier this week for this podcast, and one of the what's the word I'm looking for? One of the kind of visions for like 2030, 2040 from one of our guests was L&D won't be a thing anymore. It will be this kind of holistic group-wide HR where everything feeds into each other, and then that's where solutions come out. If you just have this kind of bubble of people that aren't specific to L&D or talent or HR or anything like that, they just all come together, which kind of feels like, and I don't disagree with them at all, but it kind of feels like that's what we have now. They've just given different names because they should all be coming together, but it feels like they've all got their different names, but they don't come together. They just kind of bang heads and go, well, yours is yours, mine's mine. We can't really talk to each other unless we've got either something to argue about or something to kind of lord over you and go, well, look what we did. And then, which comes on to the point about things like thought leadership. So we have a lot of thought leaders, trailblazers, lots of guidance, loads of people that talk on LinkedIn all the time. And then again, this is maybe just my perception, but it feels like we've got a lot more of that in L&D than other industries have. And I could be wrong, but it does feel that way. And I mentioned when I was on your podcast that, about we're just adding to the noise of recording another podcast, and the irony is not lost because we're doing that right now. But your response was definitive, where you said, this is the signal. And I have noticed a lot of people that I spoke to about, would you want to come on my podcast and chat away? Nearly all of them have had the same response, but worded differently, where they've said things like, is it just another, like, you come on and chat about your CV and everyone goes, oh yeah, great, and then leaves? I was like, no, I want to talk about proper issues, talk about what we're up to, and really get into a specific topic. And I said, a bit like David's podcast. The response was unanimous around, yes, because he does that really well. So, which was nice to hear. So, long-winded way of getting to my question was, where do you stand on almost a self-certified group of leaders or public speakers for our industry when our industry isn't performing? If we as an industry were a product, it would be, the Kodak of, 10, 20 years ago. Well, whenever the Kodak started binning off ish years ago.
So my thoughts are, look, I belong in a particular strand of L&D, which is all about impact. Some might say it's taking the moral high ground, and how could you lose? That if it's all about addressing real business problems and the approaches in order to get there, and looking back and then determining whether that worked or not, that's one strand. But what we've got to recognise is that there are multiple strands of our profession, and I think that part of that comes from the legacy. Now, there are folks who might be loud that I don't perhaps advocate for their strand, but I think that it's just as useful for us to think about mapping the voices to understand what that says about our profession. I'm certainly not one of these, choose my words carefully, free speech advocates, looking for a better word, whereby you can say anything without consequence. I'm not a believer of that. I believe you choose your words carefully and you experience the consequences, good and bad. I am, in that regard, I'm all for free speech. I'm also then not closing down or limiting the voices that are out there. Yes, it is noisy. Yes, I think that in our bubble, this seems noisier than anywhere else. But I do wonder whether it is noisier than anywhere else. And I suppose one of the tests for that is, like, I do love creators on other social media platforms. I will admit I've transitioned to Threads over Twitter, because I just find it a nicer, calmer place to spend my time. And I do see creators doing if LinkedIn was real life.
Yes, I've seen some of those. I love
that stuff, right? Yeah. And I mean, all the stuff that we experience that we think is wrong with our profession is clearly being experienced across the whole of LinkedIn. Yeah. And my sister sent me, and my sister is not in HR. She is in management in the NHS, the National Health Service. And she sent me a meme the other day which had all the buzzwords from our profession on this. And she recognised this, and then we had a little back and forth of which of those words makes us cringe most, whether it be, mindful Mondays or growth mindset, and this was her sending this to me, right?
Yeah.
Totally outside of our profession. So this happens everywhere. I think that where this is particularly useful to us is to ensure that we think critically. There was a wonderful post by Andrew Jacobs recently who said, when you see a post, have a look at who sent it, have a look at their background, see where they're working now, and just ask yourself, why do you think they said that? Right? Just understand where they are. What's their job? What do they sell? And this was in the presentation of statistics. He was saying something that, something like 60% of respondents said that they would prefer face-to-face training. So Andrew took a look at this, and he had a look at the report that it referred to, and it was in the midst of COVID, and it was published by Higher Education. So this was they have a foot in the camp of face-to-face. During the middle of COVID, everybody craved contact. And so you take a look and go, I understand your position now. And I don't think there's anything wrong professionally to be asking ourselves those questions. Because do you know what, Greg? It would really help us in the rest of our life if we just took a moment and wondered why that person is telling us this on that stage right now. And I just think that's going to become an even more important life skill. So going back to your question, I'm not up for regulating, if I'm honest, or some kind of certification of the voices. But I do strongly recommend that we, in our profession, as well as everybody else, we ask those critical thinking questions so that we understand why and who before we perhaps act on some of those voices.
Yes, and I think that's sound advice. So I was chatting to Alice from M&S about we were doing an episode on market and release. So like how you have a solution, you need to let people know about it, and we got onto the topic of the way Apple used to do their adverts. This is kind of more the latter Steve Jobs years, because now they're so big, they just go, by the way, we've got a thing. And everyone goes, great, I'll buy it. But before, there was this whole ethos around someone. So I watched a video of someone breaking down their adverts, and they basically said you have to have a product. Don't focus on millions, just one specific product per advert, and you have to have a hero and someone that's in some sort of fictitious mild peril, and the product and the hero have to save the day, but using the product to help them save the day. And they're selling laptops at the end of the day, or phones, or whatever it was they were selling at that point. It was way before the watch and everything else. I think it was even pre-iPad. So there wasn't really a huge amount of things they were selling. It was either you get a desktop, a laptop, maybe there was detachable keyboards at this point. But they went through this really structured and specific formulation of how they did their adverts, where you didn't really even need to think about, is it good quality, or will it help me, or why is it $1,000 more than this other one that I could buy? You kind of just bought into the story of it, and you bought into the brand. Whereas when I look at some people on LinkedIn, as an example, there are some people where you go, I know everything about you because you post everything about yourself, and you kind of get that perception of their brand and who they are and what they're about. And you kind of go, I know you've done some stuff, and I know that what you're saying is credible. Even if they're saying, I don't like this, you can go, well, that's opinion, so I can put that to one side. The thing that I struggle with is there are so many people talking, and it does feel a bit like, I don't want to use a Dominic Cummings phrase, but like a herd mentality of people just saying, well, lots of people are saying this phrase, so we should say it. And then we'll just start using it all the time then. And then this whole notion of leadership in learning feels a bit like, in theory, everyone should be a leader, like a thought leader to a degree, as in everyone has an experience, everyone goes through different things. Doesn't matter where you are in the corporate hierarchy, you might have a really great idea. That is a great platform to share it on. But the thing that bothers me is when there are so many people just saying the same things and no one's really dug beneath the surface. Your advice there to kind of really dig into who's saying it, why are they saying it, makes perfect sense. Thank you for your advice. And if we broke down leadership and learning into like several chunks, so you mentioned about being in a particular strand of L&D. What are those kind of ballpark chunks of leadership and learning, rather than the obvious I am a manager or a people manager kind of position?
Well, I think you can look at leadership in any context and see that how it relates. A leader has a realistic understanding of where they are and truly understands where they are. They understand why they're where they are, but they should have an idea about their purpose. I have to go into these in a bit more detail and relate it to L&D, but I think you can join those dots. If you have a purpose, then you can align that purpose and where you are to where you need to be, and then you bring others with you. So I think that in essence is it. But then when you add, so you could see if you took over the role of MD or CEO in a company, I think that there is a level of clout that comes with that, which means that if you speak to people realistically about where they are and paint a picture of, and say who you are and what you believe in, paint a picture of where you need to go, you almost have the credits to then go forward. You might have some people who then say, yeah, I've seen this before, but you'll either be swept along or booted out. I've seen this. I saw this at Disney. We had a brilliant MD as we integrated the EMEA region. He was very, very clear and ruthlessly so. And it was something that you heard the vision so often, you got swept up in it. Now, the difference between a CEO and a CLO, or anybody who's the head of L&D, is what I mentioned before. It's a lack of credibility. You need to earn that in a way that the CFO doesn't have to, perhaps the CMO doesn't have to, even the CTO doesn't have to. I mean, who the bloody hell is the learning guy? Oh yeah, that's you deliver training. I mean, it could really be broken down to that thing.
Then, sorry, just to interject there. So with the CTO, CMO, and CFO. A little thumbs up thing's popping up on my screen. It feels like they do have metrics. As in the CFO, like if the company is spending frivolously or not making enough, then obviously that's going to reflect in you gave us bad advice or you gave them too much budget or we made the wrong choices. CMO, I guess there's low engagement, there's low adoption. Let's bang on those guys.
The pipeline, yeah.
And then your CTO is, and there was one, I can't remember what they were called, Deep something recently. They had the whole Microsoft outage that kind of blew the airports down a bit. Like, I think it was their owner was on the news going, I'm really sorry. And it was like, okay, but that's a big thing to have on your shoulders. Whereas with learning, if you're in that same level of all of those other guys, all those other roles, and then you've got CLO on the side, wherever it fits in that structure, surely there has to be something of that gravity and that weight to be able to say, as in if you just said you're the guy that delivers training, I mean, surely a good CLO would have a better response than just going, yeah, I do. Like, what's their metric? What's the thing that they should be saying? And what are the things that you're seeing people kind of getting away with or just kind of going along for the ride on?
Well, Just to close off the point, you've inferred to this. There is a level of gravitas that comes with the others already. You can join the dots. The CPO themselves or the CHRO will have less. It's in the pecking order. It wasn't that long ago that they were just administrators. I joined L&D, or training as it was, when the HR department was personnel, and it was administrative. So I'm not sure the HR function in itself carries that gravitas. And then a function within that, L&D, is going to carry less. So my point is that whilst the gravitas may be given or assumed in those other roles, it isn't here, so we have to earn it. And I think that that's a really important role. We don't earn it by delivering the expected and requested version of L&D, because that doesn't lead to outcomes. It goes back to what you were saying before. All we can measure are the indicators of popularity. Did someone turn up? Did they stay to the end? Did they like it? Would they recommend it to a friend? Right? That's how you would. That's how shops and restaurants all measure their popularity, and it's a popularity contest. And whilst we measure ourselves with popularity metrics, we don't deserve any credibility. So that's why we need to step into the spaces that are there for us and that are wide open for us. That there's readiness to perform, which is a crucial one that we can own. There is internal mobility, or even before internal mobility, deeper bench strengths. And we could do that by actually closing skills gaps. So there's plenty we could do that's actually right there before we even want that seat at the table where we can be at the genesis of a discussion around a departmental or organizational development initiative. We don't need that seat at the table. We're never going to get that seat at the table if we don't actually just look out for the areas that are there for the taking. So leadership in itself recognizes where you are right now. What is the perception of the organization? What do the stakeholders really think? What do your peers really think? And then are you happy with all of that? So when I joined Disney, and the HR business partners wanted to keep me at arm's length. To begin with, they thought, I understand what L&D is, and I don't really need your kind with my stakeholder, damaging my reputation with your fluffy stuff. So I needed to build those relationships before I could get access to their stakeholders, to be in a position 8 years later when the CFO's talking to me and going, can't believe you're leaving. Well, that's a relationship that you develop over time, but you have to understand where you are, and people's responses to you as the head of that function will tell you everything. First of all, are they receptive to you? Secondly, what's their expectation? What are they asking for? And what are they not so welcoming when you're positioning yourself in those conversations? So when you're saying to them in those initial conversations, what are the business problems you want help with? Are they going, thank goodness, I've been looking forward to this conversation? Yeah. Or are they saying to you, Greg, I thought you were the training guy. Yeah. And they go, right, so I understand where we are. Then you go about purpose. Go, what do I stand for? Is it putting in the nuts and bolts and getting away with it? Do you stand for actual impact regardless of the pain? Do you stand for closing the actual skills gaps? Are you there to elevate the status of L&D because you represent the industry of L&D? Or are you there close and you're looking to build a career in this wonderful company that you've joined and you want to prove your value? There's all those things. What's your purpose? What do you really stand for? So you knit those together, and then you see what the need is as well from the organizational strategy, from having your ear to the ground by aligning to your HRD. Do you really want to make sure that you increase or decrease the time to readiness, like on onboarding? Do you really want to close those skills gaps? Do you want to be the person who's brought in and turns internal mobility from empty rhetoric into a lived experience? All of that brilliant stuff. And then it is, how do you convince your team, your boss, your peers, those HR business partners and the organization that you mean business and that they should follow you into this promised land, which is distinctly different from where it is, where the buying and selling of training is an easy thing to grasp and everyone gets away with it if you just maintain the status quo. Those are really different things. And when I was talking to Christopher Lind on my podcast, he said he spent 2 years doing the groundwork. And that's mad. The thing. You will never get this given to you. So when you hear we want that seat at the table, you will never be given that seat at the table.
Yes, absolutely.
So you need to earn your stripes. You need to prove your worth. You need to get actual outcomes. And when you've proved yourself enough to enough people and with distinct situations or initiatives, you may be invited in at a time which is close to when you would like to have been invited in. But that seat is temporary. It's dynamic. So these things will change over time. It's never fully earned, but you can get closer and closer. But it really does require that. For me, is leadership. And then you leave an organization in a fundamentally different place where you've redefined the impact, the potential impact of L&D with all of those people. Now, it does make it harder for your successor to come in to either maintain or build, but that doesn't matter. It's that L&D leadership for me is all of that. But I can tell you something, none of that, absolutely none of it is either given or under the assumption that it may be maintained. It requires a persistence and a doggedness,
yes,
and an acutely attuned savvy in order to maintain, to gain it and then maintain. But I tell you what, the skills that you develop along the way, as well as the experience that you've grown, it can be transformative to both your abilities and your career. And I think that is exciting.
Absolutely. And I think all of that, I know that was a great response. I think all of that, I just thought I'm just going to just step out and take it in. All of that kind of also feeds into, so there's a couple of things. So one, the first one I was going to mention, you mentioned about the successor and you're making it really hard for them to come in. Good. Because if you've built something really good, you don't just hand it off to, the nearest person just because they're nearby. You hand it off to the right person. You build that succession plan, or you make it really hard to say, you've not only got to match me, you've got to do one better. And then that just keeps going on and on and on. Otherwise, your product, service, your community will then start to crumble and start to fail. And all the hard work you've done, a Kodak, a Blockbuster, all those kind of legacy companies kind of just go to the wayside. And then if you look at those things in the way that they didn't plan for the future, or didn't plan to even just do what they were meant to be doing and just be able to just deliver on the here and now, and even the here and now is in right now in the next month or two, is the same way that society moves on. So the way we order food now, a basic human need of needing to eat, the way we consume and order food is way different to how it was 5 years ago, 20 years ago, 30 years ago. Same with communication. We've got, we had the internet probably when I was, I don't know, less than 10, we'll say. The internet was around. I'm now 40. The way we use the internet is insane. You can wear the internet on your wrist. You can have it in your glasses and you can have it in your car, and it's bonkers. If that thing didn't happen, the world would be very different. Learning needs to keep up with that. And I feel like this whole leadership in learning needs to be people that are thinking about not only what am I delivering for the organization that I'm working for and for the people that work there, but also am I keeping an eye on what's happening outside and how can this keep up with what's going on outside? Because there's always going to be someone doing something flashier or better or quicker or smarter, but it needs to be right for the people you're servicing or you're serving. So if you're just keeping the lights on, again, you can get a machine to do that. Just holds the button down, like it's done. So I think that's where I think for me, leadership in learning needs to be somebody that is that holistic person looking at everything that's happening and looking at all the things that could accelerate or detract from that vision. And like I say, it's bringing people along, because you could have the best product, service, community, whatever it's going to be, but if nobody buys into it or if nobody knows about it, it's still going to fail, which is a shame.
It's a huge deficiency. That's not leadership. I'd say that if your intention is to lead your organization, but when you look behind, they're way off in the distance, that's not leadership. That's renegade behavior. So it's always kind of being that as well. But it's about being just a step or two ahead, in touching distance of the vast majority of folks. But as I said, I used the example before where I've seen that. I've lived that and experienced it myself. And when you go, there is an enormous amount of momentum behind just implementing status quo L&D because there's a really easy get out if people don't want to change on the status quo, and that's by saying the training didn't work.
Yes.
But in order for L&D to stand for impact, requires partnership. It requires understanding and analysis, and then a system around it in order to actually bring cohorts of the workforce forward to be able to build capability and demonstrate capability and do different stuff to achieve the required results. That is a hell of a lot harder than delivering training.
Tell me about it. I mean, I've worked for a number of really incredible people over the years, and specifically the ones that have been the best have also been the ones where they've either moved role or moved company and someone new has come in, and it's literally been, as you say, it's been that kind of night and day where, and it's been a different scenario for each case, but yeah, you could group them all under just keeping the lights on, or just knocking stuff out, or just appeasing a stakeholder rather than challenging them to be able to say, yes, I agree with the goal, like we will get you to that goal, but the way you want to get there, this isn't it. Like we need to figure something else out, or you need to give us the space to figure something out. It doesn't have to be lots and it doesn't have to be expensive, but we need to change tack. And whereas you would see the previous person saying, that would be almost their gut reaction, is to say, I know what you're about to say because you say the same thing every time, so I'm going to combat with that's you saying different. And then you see the new person saying, yeah, go on then. And that's annoying. That's frustrating. At least I find it annoying. We're nearly at time, so I'm going to run through the last couple of questions for you, and then we will let you go about your day, sir. Why do you continue to work in learning?
I love it. I'm more than 25 years in the profession now. And my experience in company at Disney and what I was able to achieve there, albeit with a technology infrastructure that was holding me back, meant that if I know that with the right tools, I could have achieved a hell of a lot more. So I think that there is, for me, it is a belief in our potential. There's a bit of unfinished business. And I also think that this is a really exciting time to be in our profession. Everything that we talked about here, for me, is an opportunity. When I talk about us not knowing how to address skills gaps, there's no part of me that's defeatist in there. It is simply a rallying cry. It's a way of saying, this is what we've always stood for, even if we've not been capable. There is no excuse now. We have the tools available to us, and they are widely available right now. So all that really matters is those different stages of leadership in truly understanding, defining our purpose, seeing the potential of our function, and then leading those myriad stakeholders forward to stand for impact. That really gets me going. So that's why I'm here. So I would like to think that I'd be looking back in 10 years and thinking, I can't believe the progress that we've made as a function. And I'd like to be part of that change. So that's what keeps me in it, Greg.
Nice.
That's not to say I don't have bad days. I look and think, crikey, are we ever going to get there? My mentors, I've been speaking with and admiring them for decades, whether that be Guy Wallace or Bob Mosier. And I know that their rallying cry has been the same for longer than mine has. But that doesn't mean that I'm not optimistic. I do think that our profession needs to turn a corner.
Yes.
And I do think that there are many more of us today than there was 5 years ago and even 10 years ago. So, yeah, I think we're on the verge of doing something special, and I want to be part of that.
Cool. I hope so too. And maybe it's the pessimist in me. I kind of feel like with the equal amount of, yes, we're on the cusp of something really good, I also feel like with the same amount of weight behind the statement of, but people are still doing the same thing they did 20 years ago and assuming that that's okay. I'm going to try and be more glass half full. That's final question. And you've alluded to a few of these things already, but what are the things if someone is in that position where they buy into this, they're doing it, they're really trying, they get it, and for whatever reason they're struggling with being able to kind of put this into action. So in terms of, the theoretical or the planning stage of doing this, they've, everything's mapped out. They know exactly what they're doing. But when it comes to execution, that's where they kind of struggle with this kind of thought leadership, or just leadership in general, actually, within learning. What are the kind of things you would suggest someone to do to either stress test it or test it out in a safe space, or just to to jump in both feet and see what happens?
So the first thing I think, Greg, is that assessment of where you are and where you're at. So I speak to many L&D people who feel stuck in a function or an organisation that doesn't value L&D or something that is beyond the expected and requested version that can't lead to impact. But for me, there is that self-reflection part, which is what is it? What L&D professional am I, and what L&D and what do I want to be known for? That is absolutely crystal, because if there is any incongruence, then that will be seen, and I think that can challenge the credibility that you're seeking to gain. So I'll go back to that. For me, it used to be, if I go back to the first 5 years of my profession, I wanted to deliver the best and best well-received training I could. There was some days, Greg, where I just wanted to get through, and I wanted to get through with high scores on the happy sheets. Oh, how things change, because all those years later, I stand for impact first.
Mm-hmm.
I think that is absolutely crucial. So wherever you are, you've got to define that, and you've got to be clear about why you're doing what you're doing. If it is impact, then what you've got to take a look is your remit, right? How do you look for or better plan for impact in the things that are in your remit? If you're involved in delivering onboarding, if that is all that you do, take a step back and ask yourself the question, if this worked, what would I see? If this doesn't work, what would I see, or what wouldn't I see? So ask yourself those tough questions first of all. If your role is in learning tech, ask yourself the question, if this was working, what would I actually be seeing? And I don't mean engagement. Engagement is an indicator towards it working. What would you be seeing? And hold yourself to account for that, and then do that in everything that you do, and then you can grow your influence from there. Now, if you are in a position where you have more autonomy and you have a lot more opportunity in your L&D function, I'd be looking at recommending you take a look at your strategy. Make sure it aligns to your organization. So when you plan for impact, you can see that it's a domino, that your stuff works, therefore that makes an impact on the organization, on a metric that's important to the organization. There's a stay in your lane element, which could be, are people staying? Are your top people staying? Are your top people moving? Are there pathways? Are people more capable as a result of engaging in your stuff? Make sure it's, and then if you've got more of a remit, or you want to forge that, then look at closing skills gaps, crucial skills gaps that are holding your organization back, or addressing business people capability problems if you have a broader remit. But take a look at where you are and where you could be to influence, to make your mark. And that is where I'd say start. It doesn't take a massive overhaul. It takes clarity from your position here. Because as I said earlier, I know my identity and my position as far as L&D is concerned, but I recognize that for others, it's very, very different. But if you know, because you plan to have made the impact that is in alignment with your purpose, then you know that you're doing enough of the right stuff. Because who am I to say that if somebody believes in something and have achieved it, and they're progressing or where they want to be in L&D, that they're doing anything wrong? Because they're not. But it starts with our purpose.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll just take that one step further. So it was actually the very, very first iteration of the product design logbook I actually shared with you. I think you're one of the first people I showed it to. And there's a stage in there about as is and to be. So as in, where are you now? Where do you want to be? And how are you measuring both? As in, a lot of times I'm hearing people saying, I just want to have this kind of outcome. I'm like, well, what's happening now? And what are your measurements on that? Because if you don't know where you are right now, how are you going to measure some sort of change then? And also, it's not just the ultimate end goal. It's all the things that make that up. So if it's things like you mentioned engagement, if engagement stays exactly the same across both, maybe that's okay. Maybe they are engaged and people are into it, but you're just not getting the execution or the output or the outcomes that you're looking for. So maybe that's fine that it stays at 60%, whatever it's going to be. But I think it's trying to break those things down. And I think that's where a lot of people, when it comes to kind of leadership in learning, really focus on the ultimate outcome and not the things that make up that outcome.
That's right.
You know, it's a bit like I'm not really into sports, but like, you know, if a team wins, you know, the team has won, but why did the team win? Because they have all these other people that work in the, you know, that are in the team, that work for the team, all the rest of it. Someone from football somewhere's going to come and kick the crap out of me for that terrible analogy, but oh well, I can live with it. Before we go, David, is there anything you want to plug? Now is the time to do it. Do you have a book?
We mentioned it before. Yeah, Greg. For people who are into podcasts, they always want more podcasts. So you'll find 150 episodes or so on the Learning and Development podcast. So please take a look at that. Or otherwise, follow me on LinkedIn. I'm pretty active, and I'll be happy to connect.
Amazing, thank you, David. And I can highly recommend your podcast. It's not just for my episode, which I thought was pretty good, but there are loads in there that I've genuinely really enjoyed. And like you say, it's nice to hear different perspectives, and there is enough variety in there. I think you've got over 150 episodes. It's nice to get, you can kind of pick and choose and have a bit of a lucky dip and hear from someone you don't even know existed or didn't know existed. Cool. Really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for coming on. And we'll probably have you back, if you're okay, when we have some little round tables and see what's going on for that.
Yeah, definitely be up for it. Thanks
Amazing.
very much, Greg. It's been a
Thank
pleasure.
you so much, David. Cheers.